They say betrayal doesn't always show up with a knife. Sometimes it slips in quietly, like the slight difference in weight when you pick up something familiar. That's what I felt the moment I held the new bottle of my seizure meds. It wasn't heavier or lighter by much, just different. Like someone had opened it, touched it, then put it back, pretending they hadn't. Keppra has been part of my life for years, twice a day, no matter what. It's how I keep the seizures at bay, how I function. I know the exact sound it makes when I shake the bottle. I know its faint metallic tang when I open the cap. But that morning, the scent was off, too clean, too generic. And the seal? The pharmacy label had been lifted and smoothed back down with just enough care to fool someone who didn't take the same pills every single day. Still, I swallowed one. I told myself maybe I was tired. Maybe I'd forgotten how a fresh batch felt. Maybe the pharmacist switched suppliers. Or maybe I was just being, in their words, overly sensitive again. In my family, doubt isn't a question. It's a weapon. If you raise your voice about something real, you're hysterical. If you stay quiet, they praise you for being strong. I walked into the kitchen, my bare feet cold against the tile. Mom was stirring her coffee. She glanced at me like she always does when she's annoyed but pretending to be polite. "You're up early," she said. "I needed to take my meds on time." She didn't reply, just sipped. I noticed my prescription wasn't where I'd left it the night before, on my desk in my locked room. It was on the edge of the counter now, next to her vitamins. That might have meant nothing, except I don't leave things unlocked. And my sister Callista had been just looking for some aspirin the night before. She always finds ways to need something from my room. And there it was again. Her perfume. That expensive rose musk blend she insists is subtle, but always lingers on every door handle she touches. Now, it clung faintly to the bottle I just opened. Years ago, she laughed about taking a couple of my pills before a job interview. Said it helped her focus. Back then, I thought it was a one-time thing. Maybe it wasn't. I didn't say anything to Mom. There's no point. After lunch, I walked down the hall to the mail basket. I flipped through coupons, magazines, and a few envelopes with old handwriting that used to make me smile. Then I saw it, a cream-colored envelope from the probate court. It had a tiny tear near the seal, a smudge where someone's thumb had pressed too hard. The postmark? 3 weeks ago. 3, not 2 days, not even 1. Someone had opened it, then hidden it. It was about Grandma Lydia's estate. I sat on the stairs and stared at it, feeling the dull ache rise up behind my eyes. This wasn't a mistake. This was strategy. Quiet erasure. Hide the letter. Swap the meds. Paint me as the one who's always overreacting. I thought of confronting Callista, but then I remembered the last time I did, how she called me dramatic in front of the whole family, how Mom didn't even look up from her salad. That night, I logged everything in my notebook. Not for them, for me. Every date, every detail. Just in case someone ever tried to tell me I imagined it all. I stood by my window, staring out into the gray spring dusk, the wind brushing the glass like a whisper I couldn't quite hear. I held the bottle in my hand. I still took the pill, because what else could I do? The twitch in my fingers started around midnight. I didn't sleep much after the twitching started. The morning came too fast, dragging my body out of the sheets like it owed something to the clock. I sat on the edge of the bed for a few seconds before reaching for my slippers. The chill in the air hadn't changed, but I had. Something about swallowing a pill that smelled like my sister's perfume felt like signing a document I hadn't read. In the bathroom, the mirror fogged up faster than usual. I wiped it with my sleeve and stared at my reflection like I was studying a stranger. My fingers trembled as I reached for the bottle again. I counted the pills without even knowing why. 49. I'd taken one yesterday morning. That meant 10 were already gone. I walked into the kitchen, the scent of burnt toast hanging in the air. Vera sat at the table with her coffee and oatmeal, scrolling through her phone. Daryl was on the other end with the newspaper, his face hidden behind headlines that didn't care I existed. "Morning," I said, mostly out of habit. Vera looked up just long enough to acknowledge sound. "Morning." No one asked how I slept. No one ever did. She took a sip of her coffee, then glanced over at me. "You know," she said, Some of us need to start contributing more around here if we want to keep treating this house like a personal clinic. It wasn't subtle, and it wasn't meant to be. I sat down slowly, not because I was tired, but because I didn't trust my knees to hold me through that kind of sentence. She didn't look at me again, just went back to her phone. Daryl flipped another page. She's not wrong. And that was that. It reminded me of something I overheard in high school once. If you can't earn your keep, you don't get to keep your place. I'd always thought it was cruel then. Now, it was just Tuesday. They said that kind of thing in different ways over the years. We're doing our best, but we're not a charity. You've got to figure things out, Natalie. Life won't wait. The words changed, but the meaning stayed the same. I cost more than I gave. I was subtraction. I was red ink on the family spreadsheet. After breakfast, I went to my room and lay down. Not because I needed to rest, but because I needed a place to exist where I wasn't being calculated against the grocery bill. I checked my phone, expecting maybe a message from Carmen or a refill alert. Instead, I saw a tag notification on social media. My aunt had posted a photo from Grandma Lydia's memorial brunch. Everyone was smiling. Callista with her hand on Vera's shoulder, Daryl in the background holding his iced tea like he belonged in a Norman Rockwell painting. I wasn't in it. But I remembered being there. I remembered that exact moment. Because Callista had told a joke that made Mom spit out her drink and I'd snapped the original photo. I scrolled back in my gallery. There it was, my version. I was standing right next to Vera. Someone had edited me out. It wasn't sloppy. It was clean, like I had never been there at all. I messaged my aunt. Hey, wasn't I in that picture originally? She didn't reply. An hour later, the post was deleted. No apology, no explanation, just gone. I sat on my bed and stared at the screen for a long time. It didn't even sting the way I thought it would. It was colder than that. Numb, like holding ice in your hand too long. That night, I pulled out my journal. I didn't write a lot. Just one line. They don't see me because it's easier to love a version of me that doesn't complain, doesn't cost, doesn't exist. I closed the book and stared at the ceiling. Then I did something I didn't expect. I opened my photo gallery. I started deleting old pictures, family vacations, birthdays, the Thanksgiving when Callista and I weren't talking, but still smiled for the camera. One by one, I erased myself. Not because I hated the memories, but because I wanted to feel what it was like to vanish on my own terms, to disappear before someone else decided to do it for me. The call to the pharmacy should have taken 3 minutes. I only needed to check on a refill. Instead, it took 11. Most of that time was silence, just me listening to the soft clicks of a keyboard and the woman on the other end saying, "Huh," too many times for comfort. "Ma'am, it looks like your insurance plan isn't active anymore." I blinked at the kitchen tiles. "What?" "You were removed from the policy on the 10th of last month. It says here the primary account holder made the change." "Who's the primary?" "Vera Mayfield." Of course. I ended the call without another word. My hands felt colder than the mug I was holding. I stared at the microwave clock like it had betrayed me too. 10 days. 10 days I'd been swallowing pills with the belief that someone, anyone, still considered my health worth covering. I thought back to what Dr. Martinez once told me. Missing just 2 days of medication is like pulling the battery from your fire alarm. You won't hear the warning until it's too late. The cost of staying alive in this house was higher than I thought. I scribbled the quote into my notebook and underlined it twice. That evening, the doorbell rang. I figured it was another delivery from my mother's shopping sprees. Stress therapy, as she liked to call it. But when I opened the door, a man in his 40s stood there with a rental form in his hand and a hopeful look on his face. "Is the room still available?" he asked. The ad said to ask for Vera. He pointed past me, into the hallway, toward my room. I didn't answer. I just closed the door. Slowly. Silently. My breath caught in my throat as I walked back down the hallway, shoes brushing the carpet like they were intruding on someone else's home. Later, I asked her, quietly, not with rage, just clarity. Did you list my room for rent? Vera didn't even pause the TV. You're barely here, Arlena. I figured you'd understand. We all have to make sacrifices. I wanted to ask who we was, because none of them had sacrificed their healthcare, their bedroom, or their dignity. Daryl didn't say anything. He just scratched his arm like he hadn't heard the conversation. In the dining room, I found a small pile of mail next to the fruit bowl. Envelopes with my name. Most were opened, then resealed sloppily. Some were marked, "Return to sender," with that cold red ink that screams you've been left out of something essential. They didn't even give me the chance to claim what was mine. I whispered to the empty room. I'm still alive. You just forwarded me into absence. That night, I wrote in my journal. No long entry. Just a single thought that burned through my spine as I scribbled. You don't get kicked out with words. You get kicked out with absence, with decisions made without you, with strangers showing up for your bed. The air felt heavier when I went upstairs. I didn't even bother brushing my teeth. I just wanted to lock the door and pretend that boundaries still mattered. That's when I saw it, taped right to my door like a motel flyer. Viewing Friday at 6 p.m. No name, no apology, no shame. I ripped it down in one quick motion, my hand trembling, but not from fear anymore. There's something colder than fear. It's the realization that your place in your own home is conditional. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I'd stay quiet. But if they were preparing to erase me, they underestimated how loud absence can scream. I hadn't even opened my eyes before the buzzing started. My phone lit up on the nightstand like a warning flare, notification after notification stacking in quick bursts, 47 in total. A number like that meant one of two things, death or drama. And since no one in my family had the decency to go quietly, I already knew which one it was. Callista's voice met me before my feet hit the floor. Welcome back to Inside the Glass House, where we talk family, dysfunction, and healing. Today's topic: when your siblings' breakdown becomes your life's background noise. I sat there, in my robe, listening to her outline my life with surgical precision. She never used my name. Callista was too smart for that, but every word was branded with my initials in blood. She used to fake seizures to get out of chores, she said, like she was reading a bedtime story to the world. Then it became about pills. Then it was about control. The comments poured in. You're so brave. Thank you for calling this out. Family doesn't mean enablement. I closed the app before it could tell me what else I wasn't. Downstairs, Vera was in the kitchen, humming to herself. I stood in the doorway until she looked up. She didn't flinch. You knew she posted that. She stirred her coffee, eyes never leaving the mug. It's her truth, Arlena. You can't control how other people process things. And I can't correct a lie without being labeled unstable? Vera shrugged. Let people talk. You focus on healing. Daryl sat at the table, sipping his orange juice like it was whiskey. He didn't look up, didn't speak. He was the master of neutrality, the Switzerland of our home. I left the kitchen before I started screaming. I posted something vague online, a line about truth and silence and who gets to hold the mic when one person's version becomes the gospel. It got 2 likes, one from a bot. The other from a coworker who texted me 15 minutes later. Hey, just saw the podcast. You okay? I started to reply. Then I saw Callista's tweet. When the truth hurts, the guilty scream. No mention. But it cut through the screen like a scalpel. I called the legal hotline that afternoon. Asked about defamation, privacy, the cost of gag orders. The woman on the other end was polite, but blunt. If they don't name you and you're not a public figure, it's hard. You can try, but it's an uphill battle. So I hung up and went to bed early, trying not to think about the way my name was being reshaped in rooms I'd never walk into. The next day, a sheriff knocked at the door. I assumed it was about a noise complaint. Maybe one of Vera's middle-of-the-night cleaning frenzies finally ticked off the neighbors. But when I opened the door, the man didn't smile. Arlena Mayfield? Yes? He handed me a folded notice. You've been served. Callista had filed a statement. Said I'd threatened her, said I'd exhibited signs of increasing emotional volatility, claimed I'd broken items in the house, none of which were mine to begin with. She's lying, I told the sheriff, though I knew he wasn't the audience who mattered. I'm just the messenger, ma'am. He left without another word. I stood on the porch, the paper in my hand, the world suddenly quieter than it had been in weeks. Not calm, just still, like the eye of a storm that hasn't finished spinning. They weren't just trying to erase me. They were building a version of me no one would want to remember. I opened the notice, scanning for whatever dagger Callista had slid between the legal lines. Subject may be mentally unfit and potentially aggressive. That sentence. It wasn't new. It was just the first time it came with a signature. The library had always been my refuge. Quiet, predictable, safe in a way that didn't require anyone else's permission. But that morning, as I walked past the magazine racks and settled into my usual corner near the tall windows, the air felt sharp, like the silence wasn't mine anymore. I opened my laptop to research legal aid. Not that I expected a miracle, but I needed something to anchor my thoughts. Terms like public defamation, malicious intent, and first-party consent laws filled the screen. I scrolled with one hand, the other resting near my water bottle, fingertips twitching just slightly. Then came the shift. My vision blurred, not the fog of tears, but the familiar wash of static that rolled across my brain like a tide. I blinked hard, gripped the edge of the table. My knees gave out before I could stand. The chair scraped backward, and then, nothing but the hard echo of my head hitting the marble bench. Voices swirled. She's seizing! Call 911! Feet scuffled, pages rustled. I felt myself lifted. Not fully, just enough to know I wasn't alone, but I wasn't really there either. My body did what it always did, trembled, jerked, resisted every ounce of control I'd fought to keep. Somewhere in the fog, someone pressed a cold compress to my forehead. Lights flickered, not from above, from inside me. When I opened my eyes again, everything smelled like antiseptic and artificial lavender. I was in a hospital bed. A nurse stood over me, tapping on a tablet. "You're lucky," she said, not looking up. "Someone got to you quick." I tried to speak, but my tongue felt stuck in place. "You were listed as DNR. That's why there was a delay in response until we could verify." I blinked at her. "DNR?" She finally looked at me. "Do not resuscitate. It was in your file, dated 2 years ago." That's not mine. I never signed one." She frowned and turned the tablet so I could see. There it was, my name, my date of birth, a signature that wasn't mine. My stomach turned. When I got home later that afternoon, still shaky but stable, there was a plain white envelope resting on my nightstand. My name on the front. The return address? Dr. Elston, my former neurologist, now retired. Inside was a handwritten letter, shaky with age, but unmistakably sincere. "Arlena, I owe you an apology. I should have delivered years ago. When your mother asked me to consolidate your files for insurance clarity, I believed I was honoring your privacy. Instead, I compromised your care. There are notes missing, revisions I allowed under pressure. I thought I was protecting your family's image. I realize now I endangered you." I read it once, then again, then a third time. They hadn't just refused to believe me, they'd rewritten the record. I scanned the letter immediately, saving it in 3 places. One file I labeled, Court Backup, Truths They Buried. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, hearing my pulse in my ears. That evening, I called Carmen, my old nurse. "You still at that clinic downtown?" I asked. She hesitated. "Yeah, why?" "I'm coming in tomorrow. I want to file something they can't unfile." The next morning, I dressed in clean clothes, tucked the USB drive into my coat pocket, and walked into the small claims clinic like I had nothing left to lose. Because I didn't. Not in the way that mattered anymore. They had spun stories. Now, I was building timelines, not to take revenge, to take my life back. It started with a mistake, or maybe a miracle. I opened my inbox to find a forwarded email from Aunt Marlene. The subject line alone made my stomach turn. Estate planning, how we keep it clean. I knew she hadn't meant to send it to me. The original thread was clearly intended for Callista, Vera, and Daryl. I scrolled through the chain with my thumb, my heartbeat quickening with every sentence. "She'll just drag things out with her drama," Callista wrote. "We need to close this fast. Split it 3 ways." Vera replied within minutes, "Let's just not tell her about the meeting." And Daryl, in classic fashion, contributed with a single thumbs-up emoji. No words, just approval. I stared at the screen, my eyes burning, not from tears but from clarity. This wasn't an emotional betrayal, it was strategic. Paper deep and cold as polished marble. My existence had been reduced to a scheduling conflict and a spreadsheet column. I didn't confront them. Not this time. Instead, I printed the email thread, 3 copies, double-sided. I slipped one into a Ziploc and labeled the folder, "Admission before court." If they wanted to play this like a business transaction, fine. I would treat it like litigation. That night, I was halfway through dinner when my phone lit up. Nikki's name flashed across the screen. We hadn't spoken in months. "Hey," she said, breathless. "Do you remember that night at Kayla's birthday, when Callista got drunk and made a joke about my meds being her party necklace?" "Yeah, I remember. I recorded it." My breath caught. "You what?" "I didn't mean to," she said quickly. "I was filming the cake moment, and she started talking in the background. I went to pull it today, but... Arlena, the file's corrupted. Almost gone." "Almost?" "There's a backup, a cloud autosave. It's grainy, but it's there." It took me until 2 in the morning, but I found it. The audio was faint, but clear enough. Callista's voice, slurred but sharp. "Let's see if she has another seizure at Grandma's will reading. I've got her pills right here, necklace and all." I clipped the segment, enhanced the sound, and saved it 3 times on a flash drive, an encrypted cloud, and a password-protected folder labeled Primary Evidence, Inheritance Fraud. That morning, I walked into the county courthouse with a steady hand and a quiet mind. The receptionist looked up from her keyboard as I approached the desk. "I need to know the process for submitting evidence in a family inheritance dispute." She raised an eyebrow. "You a lawyer?" "No," I said. "I'm the person they didn't think would show up." She handed me a form. "Attach anything relevant. Drop it at counter B by noon." I thanked her and sat in the corner with my clipboard, filling out every section like it was an oath. For once, my name was the only one on the page that mattered. That evening, back at the house, I closed my bedroom door, not to keep them out, but to give myself space to breathe. I pulled out my notebook, flipped to a clean page, and wrote across the top in bold black ink. Exhibit A, what they thought I'd never know. They had spent years trying to unwrite me. Now, I was building a record they couldn't erase. The courthouse lobby smelled like old printer toner and lemon disinfectant. My shoes echoed too loud against the tile, but I walked in like I belonged there. No one asked who I was, no one needed to. I held a folder marked Evidence AF and a USB drive labeled with my initials and a date, the day I decided I wasn't going to be edited out of my own story. I sat on the bench near the window, watching as attorneys in wrinkle-free suits buzzed around with clipboards and coffee. I didn't have either. What I had was a timeline, 2 backup drives, and the type of silence that stops pretending it's weakness. At the clerk's window, I slid the affidavit forward along with the printouts and the USB. The woman behind the glass skimmed the paperwork, then asked, "Would you like this held under seal until the hearing?" "No," I said. "Let them know I came prepared." She nodded once, tapped a few keys, and said, "You'll be called shortly. Stay in the lobby." The pre-hearing room wasn't dramatic. No high ceilings or banging gavels, just a medium-sized office with 2 worn leather chairs and a wall clock that ticked too slow. Vera sat on one side of the room, dressed like a widow, even though no one had died yet. Daryl leaned back, arms crossed, unreadable. Callista sat upright, polished and poised like she was about to film a brand deal, not face a legal challenge. When the evidence was played, the room changed. My voice wasn't the one that filled the space. It was hers, Callista's, drunk, laughing, caught mid-joke from that night months ago. "I keep her meds on a necklace," she slurred. "Let's see if she has another seizure at the will reading." The room fell quiet. Not heavy, not sad, just still. Daryl looked down at his hands. Vera's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Callista tried to scoff, but the judge raised a hand. "You'll have your turn." But today, the facts spoke first. Just as the judge began to shuffle papers, a voice from the back of the room cut through the air. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Everyone turned. Mrs. Harrow, our next-door neighbor for nearly 2 decades, stood in the doorway. Her frame was thin, but her eyes were sharp. "I've seen Callista throw out Arlena's medication," she said. "Not once, twice, and I said nothing. I didn't want trouble, but watching someone lie while another one breaks, I can't stay quiet anymore." Callista opened her mouth, but this time the judge didn't even look her way. The next moments passed without theatrics, no yelling, no slamming of fists, just silence thick with exposure. It was the kind of moment people think they'll celebrate. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to explain myself. I wasn't defending or clarifying or shrinking. I was just seen. In the back of my mind, I heard something Carmen once told me after one of my early seizures. You don't always have to scream to survive. Sometimes, survival is the scream. The judge gathered the paperwork, scanned the documents again, and looked directly at me. "I see enough here," she said slowly, "to consider separate motions, inheritance fraud, endangerment, and obstruction." I nodded once, not in relief, in readiness. The courtroom felt different that morning, not because it had changed, but because I walked in without dread, without that old ache in my chest that used to warn me I was walking into a space where I'd be erased. My name was on the docket. My voice was in the record. My evidence had a folder. Callista sat 3 seats down, her legs crossed like a beauty pageant winner at a press conference. Vera wore black again, even though no one was grieving. And Daryl avoided my eyes like they owed him something. The judge cleared her throat. Her voice was calm, even. "We have reviewed the documents, audio files, witness statements, and digital correspondences submitted. This court finds that one party acted with malicious disregard for the health and safety of another." She turned her gaze to Callista. As such, Callista Mayfield is disqualified from receiving her share of the inheritance under Clause 7 of the will, which bars any beneficiary proven to have harmed another for personal gain. It wasn't a gavel moment. No gasps, just truth, plain and final. Callista's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. Her silence was louder than anything she'd ever broadcast. Vera stood up, furious. "She's still your sister," she snapped at the judge, then spun toward me. "You really think money replaces blood?" The judge didn't flinch. Sisterhood doesn't erase accountability. Daryl rose without a word. He didn't look at anyone, just walked out, and for once, I didn't care where he went. Before we adjourned, the judge opened a final envelope and read the label aloud. "To be opened only if Arlena is in court alone." She unfolded the letter slowly. Her voice softened. "Arlena, if you're hearing this, it means the rest of them failed you. But you didn't fail yourself. You never did." I knew what they were, even when I couldn't stop them. "I hope this helps you build a life where you never have to beg for space again. Grandma Lydia." I didn't cry. I walked out of the courthouse holding that letter like it weighed more than the check I would later receive. I used part of the inheritance to pay off every medical bill they'd pretended didn't exist. I moved into a quiet apartment across town, where the neighbors say hello but never pry. I installed a medication lockbox with a biometric reader. I kept the windows open. I bought fresh towels. I stopped explaining myself. Peace, I've learned, doesn't look like fireworks. It looks like stillness. A week later, Ruben stopped by. He didn't ask to come in. He handed me an envelope and a photo. "I was wrong," he said. "I believed her. I shouldn't have." The photo was from 2 years ago. Me, Callista, and Vera at Thanksgiving. In this copy, I hadn't been cropped out. I nodded, thanked him, and closed the door. There are apologies that fix things, and then there are the ones that prove you've moved too far ahead to turn around. That night, I made tea, sat by the window, and stared into nothing, content to let silence settle without panic. Forgiveness isn't for them. It's the lock I close so I can finally walk away.